I have not a question, but I would like to know more about the translations project that you mentioned very briefly. Is it done automatically? Is there a way to crowdsource?
This is the plan is that they're working with natural language processing, and this is Davil's area. He gave the talk here in Berlin last year in the conference that I flagged up on that. This is very much his area. I listened with great interest. The idea of automatic translation is more your area, and yeah. I'm slightly skeptical, but I really, really hope it does come through. I would imagine that they would have the part on there about having the user evaluation, I think would come into it, because they've transcribed the English into English text, and then what they're looking at is some sort of automated process for translating it into the different languages, and then the videos themselves, together with the, if you think of a movie with subtitles, right? The video clips are going to have English subtitles, and then those subtitles are going to be translated into different languages, and then the video as a whole. This was the point about our very, very short attention spans. Although they're 45 to 60-minute videos, they will then be segmented into small bite-sized pieces, and then that will have metadata, discovery metadata attached to it, so that you can, for instance, if we had that video of Oliver Taplin, I'm sure that wouldn't be included in there, but you could say, what does Oliver Taplin say? What are the important things that you need to know about tragedy? This bit, this bit, this bit. And then you would take those out. So it's rather than listening to me talking for 60 minutes, you have little bite-sized bits of what's the important things that we got out of this. That's my understanding. At the moment, and this is going to be streamed on their server, at the moment they don't have the capacity for streaming. They do have it done, but it is not available for streaming. That I do know. We had a workshop on digital humanities resources earlier this year, and Davil came and spoke at that. And we had a session on open education resources, and really I just put it over to Davil to tell the audience about it. So it's his area, but it's great if they can get it done.
Are there any other questions for?
Yes. I think it would be, I don't know how this is being done in this community. It would be interesting to have a look at what happens if you use open education material. Because I think we had a little, so to say, subsistence, rest, or no root ever experiment in Cologne with it, to put up things like that for archaeology inside. In Cologne, archaeology has, for a sort of a local tradition, a thing it's called introductory course or so. It's very specific. It's different from introductions in classical archaeology and other places where you can study that in Germany. And we had it for some years that those things were being uploaded, and people who used that then naturally felt themselves probably too close to plagiarism or whatever, or to not wanting to prepare for their lecture, and just taking that and pushing it through and through and through. And they were thinking about how to set that up as a whole presentation, as a sequence of slides. Before, there were students, before the computer age, went into archaeology, let's say in the early 90s, there were students who tried to set up a catalog of sources. So to say that somebody has to have seen before he reaches the first 5-semester medium exam, so to say, or pre-exam. So I think people try to loosen it up into single object. That is one approach we have seen, which never reached that level in of publicity. There was another thing where they tried to set up or put up full slide sequences for each seminar session, so to say 12 for a semester. But that died down again. I guess, is there research or a theory or thinking about what people do with this? That means how original can you be if you use something that somebody else did for you? And I think that is the conflict, at least in Germany, or in German self-understanding in university. We know that nobody is really original, but everybody tends to try to seem to himself to be that.
Yeah, what is the issues around that? Very interesting, because it depends on the culture actually where you are, and as you say, that there is very little that is absolutely original. I've come from a teaching tradition where we've always shared each other's teaching material anyhow.
Yeah.
But I understand that what you're suggesting is that in somehow that could be seen to undervalue the individual efforts of the individual teacher if he's using other people's material. I have quite a lot of my teaching material, and I just put an acknowledgement on it, right? As I did on the slide at the very beginning. So, well, a lot of this material is shared with Uli. We worked it up, and I've incorporated some material, not actual slides, from Davor. I'm quite comfortable with that. I don't have a problem, but I do understand that other people do, and where it actually comes from, I'm not sure. I think it is something to do with the culture, within which one has become a teacher and educator. And I think this is the important thing about the part of the teacher training program at UCL, where they were having that as one of the UCL projects, where they're trying to create these repurposable resources, and they are using this for the training of the new lecturing staff. And the idea being that will become part of the workflow. This is in our area of applying digital technologies to classics. This is the message, I guess, that we've been saying, and the argument that we've been using, is that it's not really until people who have grown up and were taught using computational techniques and methodologies, when they become the teachers, they will be quite used to it and not see the problem with it. However, if you always have people who are coming up who have never been exposed to this, and there's nothing the matter with doing text-based research and solely manuscripts and books, not a problem with that at all, but you will never get this breadth until it becomes part of the teaching. As people come up, it will then become self-creating. I mean, that's how I see it. I think perhaps my first foray into teaching, I trained as a language teacher, and as part of my training, we were given the book. Your class is intermediate. This is the book for intermediate. This is what you teach them. That's how I was trained, so perhaps that's why I feel that way. But I've had various other discussions with groups of people, teachers, about this, and they have different worries and concerns. And one of them, almost, not quite the same, but different, that was voiced, was, I mentioned several of the problems in here. And what my colleague is saying to me is that if I publish something, it's gone through peer review. Right? Other people have looked at it. It's gone through an editorial process. My teaching material, and put it up online. There's probably going to be mistakes in it, and those mistakes might make me look bad. Right? And that's quite a legitimate, just be careful what you put up there. But I know I have mistakes in my material. I have mistakes in my material. And as far as I'm concerned, I would be very, very happy if somebody took my material out of Humbox, improved it, put it back up there.
I think
I would be happy.
The question of mistakes, I guess, probably also in theory and practice isn't that difficult. There are mistakes in any kind of materials. And if we look at university teaching, when I was a student, I don't know, 30 years ago or what, 100, people also prefabricated things for teaching. My teachers took that, and they weren't digital, but they were there. And I think in archaeology probably it's quite, again, a little bit different than in textual sciences, text-based sciences, because in archaeology you always have the sources, and you just, at first you need only representations of the objects and series of the objects, and you do certain things with it, try to put up a line of examples that leads somewhere or contexts to the objects.
I think what's important is it needs to have, even if you're using material that other people have generated or that you've used yourself before, then it needs to be updated. I mean, I teach the same modules, and I have to, well, it's a matter of professional pride to myself that I put new material in it every time. And I looked at my Moodle page, and it had last year's date on it. And I thought, I've got to put something new on there. I don't want the students looking at the Moodle page and it says last edited 2012, right? So what can I do? And that surprised me because actually the presentation slides were new, but it hadn't, because it was just a new slide with the same name. It actually hadn't registered that it had actually been edited. But this is the other thing, and I think the students will want to see up-to-date material in there, depending, of course, what the topic is that you're teaching. If you're teaching Virgil, then perhaps you don't need something that's got a 2012 and 13 date on it. But if you're teaching social media or freedom of information, then you need the most up-to-date stuff on it, and that's an important criteria. And I will always update all my material. And when I was a student, actually it wasn't that long ago because I was a mature student, what was very noticeable to me, and I would look at it and I would look and see how out of date some of the teaching material was for what was supposed to be a technical subject, and the amount of errors and how outdated actually some of the material in there was. That surprised me. At the time as a student, I was not aware of how out of date it was. It's only when I progressed a little bit more, I looked back and I thought, okay, that never changed in the last few years. So bringing it up to date, I think, is very, very important.
I just wonder what your thoughts are on this particular point of that you're putting up teaching materials there. Students are engaging with those, and so if you really do think about teaching and learning as being truly integrated, even bringing research to bear on it, that they can be mutually influencing, in that if students take those materials and adapt them, deploy them, use them, comment on them, critique, that can then feed in to the educational object for the next cycle. So you're actually together participating in a knowledge construction.
What I've not been able to do is to create something whereby the students could actually do that, but it is thought. One thing that surprised me is, I think it was 2 years ago, one of my students' assignments was referencing some of my material in Humbox, which I thought was intuitive. But again, with my material in Humbox, because Humbox is Google indexed, if you just search my name whatever the topic was, one of the hits that would come up would be the resource in Humboldt. So she had actually, taken a quote out of that and actually referenced it in the bibliography to my material in Humboldt. I hadn't really thought about how one should reference something that you get from Humboldt, I don't know. But I just referenced it to me and with UR and blah blah. But getting the students involved in actually the cyclical nature of it to improve the material, you would have to compensate for perhaps their lower confidence in the sense that it's difficult for them to perhaps disagree with something that you've put on there or to try to correct your work. It's a bit, the sort of the power balance is out there. But I mean, I know about errors in mine because the first time I took over one of my modules and I was using, I'd reconfigured some of the slides, and this was a technical module and I'd written some of the stuff in there. It was a small class, and when I was going around the students, one of them would say, "That should be a colon, Simon, not a semicolon." Right? I'm like, "Oh, thank you very much." And I could make a note and I would correct them. And the students, that particular student, would be very comfortable in doing that. But what we'd have to find is a way in which we could make that a teaching-based exercise. The other thing that's very, very difficult and challenging is to get the students actually to do something if it's not assessed, but to actually make it part of their assessment, to motivate them to actually do it. What was very pleasing, and the reason that book chapter has got a third name on it, and that's Iris Simons, and she was one of the master's students, actually not on my program but on a different one, is that she did a lot of research on open educational sources for her dissertation, but it was Iris that processed all my material from Microsoft, Office, PowerPoints and that, into open document format. She spent a lot of time on it. She was quite willing to do it for no pay. The challenge of doing it, we sort of gave her the reward by giving her equal billing on the thing. But that was interesting as well. She actually was very, very instrumental. Thank you, Iris, if you're watching. I haven't forgotten. She did all the laborious work of processing. I gave her the material, said, "Here you are. This is it in PowerPoint slides, Word documents." And she processed it all for me into open document formats. It's great. For no credit. No money and no credit.
Thanks a lot again. Thank you.